I have a question. Do you believe God? I mean, do you really believe Him to the extent that it impacts the way that you live, everything that you do every single day? Because a true belief in God, that faith, is what allows you to live your life in a way of righteousness every single day. That belief in God, knowing that He has given us His Spirit, His power to overcome all of the evil of the world. And as always, I'm so glad to be here for the Sunday School Renaissance, powered by the Sanctuary Academy. And of course, we're formerly known as the Sanctuary Sunday School. And this week's lesson is about faith, the faith of Abraham. And as we know, Abraham is known as the father of the faithful. And here we're in the book of Romans, and this is Paul writing, teaching on faith. Now, when you speak of the Jewish customs and all of their traditions, Abraham was the father, so they held him in the highest of esteem. So we see here that Paul is using Abraham to illustrate the faith of God. And he talked about Abraham and his faith. And he asked the question, that was Abraham's faith rooted in his works? Could he have possibly done anything to earn the righteousness of God? And the answer to that question is no. Abraham's righteousness came through his faith. And he said, if it had come through his works, then it would show a debt, not grace of God. And who are we that God should ever be indebted to us for anything? So that faith is what caused Abraham's righteousness, because he believed and God saw fit, because he believed, his faith moved God and God saw fit to make him righteous. It was not about anything that Abraham had done. And this was an important lesson to learn, because sometimes we get caught up in religious practices and rituals and we think that that's what our salvation is in. And we believe more in the things that we do than we believe in God. And that's getting it twisted. So what we want to do is always believe God first and allow our belief in God to make us righteous. And then that impacts our actions, instead of reversing it and thinking that it's our actions that makes us righteous. And so then he brought in another favorite, who was David. And he talked about how David spoke of the blessedness of man, that God did not impute sin into man. He imputed righteousness. And when you use the word of imputation, that means that it is something that God puts in you. Again, it's not something that we've earned, and it's not something that we deserve. My dad often talks about sometimes we act like we have a monopoly on salvation and righteousness. It's my God. And the only way you're going to be saved is if you do things the way I do and do what I tell you to do. But we have to do what God tells us to do. And what allows us to do what God is commanding us to do is that faith. That faith of Abraham. See, it was the faith of Abraham that caused him to be obedient and leave his family. Abraham left everything that was familiar to follow God. And that's why God gave him this righteousness and blessed him and blessed his seed. And think about it. The promises that God made to Abraham, Abraham didn't even live to see them. He didn't see all of the nations. He didn't see all of this stuff that's going on. But he believed God and he walked in faith, just like he saw the promise right in front of his face. And that is an example of faith, the faith of Abraham. Sometimes, especially in this age of modernism and technology, we want to be able to see it, touch it, feel it, smell it, taste it before we believe it. But that's not faith. We've got to believe God, trust his promises, and stand on his word no matter what is in front of us. And just like Abraham didn't even see it, even if we never see it, we've still got to believe it and love God. And then he spoke of the circumcision. And then he spoke of the circumcision. And that's something that was a practice where they cut off the foreskin of the male. And it was something that was symbolic of the righteousness and the cleanliness of God. It was symbolic that you had faith and had been committed to righteousness. It was not the circumcision that made you righteous. And he went on to say, he said that Abraham's faith is what caused his righteousness, and Abraham is the father of the faithful, and he is the father of the circumcision, meaning that Abraham was righteous before there was a circumcision. This circumcision was a sign to the world that he was clean and set apart by God. And this all came along up under the law of God. And so they were kind of getting confused, because after Jesus came, Jesus came and died for everybody. And that's part of the promise of Abraham. God promised Abraham that through his seed, the entire world would be blessed. Jesus came down through Abraham's seed. And of course, he is the one who saved the entire world. So at this point, they were not able to force off Jewish customs onto all of the Christians and everybody else in society. It was not necessary for the Gentiles to have to be circumcised or do what the Jewish people did in order to be saved. And this is what Paul wanted them to understand, that salvation and the righteousness of God had been made available to everybody through his son, Jesus Christ, and that they could not exclude anybody just because they did not practice their religious traditions. And boy, is that a lesson for us today, because especially in this post-pandemic era, things are changing and we are reaching God in new ways and going to new levels. The gospel, the righteousness, the salvation of God has not changed. It will never change, but there are new methods, and we've got to not be so rigid, not be so stern in doing things the way my mama did it, the way I did it. If it was good enough for my mama, it was good enough for me. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you. It's not about you. It's not about your mom. It is about God and what God is requiring, and being able to allow God to move through new tools and new ways of doing things. And I keep talking about this post-pandemic church, which is kind of why I renamed the Sanctuary Sunday School to the Sunday School Renaissance, because our churches, especially our Sunday schools, are dying, and we need a rebirth, and we need to breathe new life into things and stop trying to force old, antiquated methods on people. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. But the way that we seek Jesus may be shifting a little bit. Jesus wore gowns and sandals. Our preachers don't wear that. They didn't have running water. We have running water. They didn't have electric lights. We have electric lights. They didn't have computers and internets. We have all of those things, which is why I'm able to bring the lesson to you. And so I encourage everybody to embrace every tool, everything that you have to get this word out, because it is not about me, what I like, what I want. It is about drawing souls to Christ. I'm going to share this very briefly. As you all know, I'm a pastor's daughter, and my father is 84 years old, and we don't always agree on ministry methods. And so we had a heated conversation, right? It was heated. I would never cross the line of being disrespectful, but it was heated because I saw some things going on in the church where it was kind of suffocating the church, and we weren't going to be able to last. So we had this conversation, and he didn't like it. He wasn't that happy with me, and I say, okay, but I felt compelled, right, to stand my ground and also remain respectful, because I want us to be able to really touch as many people and change lives. So then we got together and we went to a program later that evening. And in that program, they were doing all of the things that I had told my dad was not working and we would not be able to do, and we needed to shift. And he sat there and he came back to me the next morning. He said, that service we went to last night proved you right. And he said, I'm going to listen to you, and we're going to incorporate some of your ideas. And that just did my heart good. And I shared that because I'm not that young. I'm 50. But the younger generations, I want you to not be afraid. Fast. pray and ask God to open up a door, make a way, and give you the time where you can say, if God has given you something, if God has shown you something, it's not your place to reprimand the pastor or call the pastor out or go out and talk about him. And it might not even be your place to go out and start your own ministry. Maybe you're there to work with the pastor, to make suggestions, to do something, and it has to be done in love. I went to my dad because A, I love him, and B, I love the ministry that he has labored in for the last 40 years, and I don't want to see it suffer. I want to see it flourish. That was where my heart was, so God blessed in that. And this does go along with the lesson, because this is what Paul was doing. Jesus had come. He had lived, he had died, and he had gone back to heaven, and they still trying to make people do all of those things, the new converts, the Gentiles, and trying to make Christianity this little exclusive thing where only a select group of people get to live right and experience the righteousness of God and go to heaven. I want heaven to be real big. I want everybody I know to be saved and go to heaven. And that is our goal when we talk about the faith of Abraham. We are living in unprecedented times. I know we've heard that over and over again, unprecedented times, and we've never seen times like this before. It can be frightening, and sometimes we don't know what to do. Some of the very things that we thought would never change have changed. Some of them are gone. It is 600,000 people gone, and that is devastating, and it's difficult. I was even driving earlier today. I had to go downtown, and I got on the highway at about 6 a.m. Typically, it's bumper to bumper because of rush hour traffic here in Chicago. I breeze straight through. I like that, but I'm thinking, man, this is different. And you can't be afraid and understand that it's God's righteousness. It's the same God. That same God that imputed that righteousness into David. The same God that recognized Abraham's faithfulness and made him righteous. He's still there. He's right there. You have the same access to God that Abraham had. You have the same access to God that David had. Trust God. Have faith in God. Believe in God. Do you believe God? And my answer is yes, I believe God. Just type in the comments. I know I've been doing this lately, but I love reading your comments. It just gives me strength. Just type yes, I believe God. It doesn't matter what anybody else may say. I believe God. Doesn't matter what the report may be. I believe God. Doesn't matter what anyone around me is doing. I believe God, and I know that my belief, that faith, is what is going to seal my righteousness until the day that Jesus can return and receive me to the Father, because that's all that really matters to me. And if that means that I might have to change some of the things that I was doing, if that means changing the way that I'm doing things in order to reach more people and take more people and into the church and direct them and guide them toward God, then that's what I'm going to do. I love the writings of Paul because he was such an innovator when he started teaching and he started saying stuff that people weren't saying, and they were very traditional back then. And he even told in one scripture, he said, look, that which I received, I'm delivered unto you. That which also I received from God. And in so many words, what I'm saying, it came from God. And you don't control my gospel. And we don't control the gospel. All we do is share it and open up your heart and allow God to speak through you. Let God do a new thing in you. And we want people, the Bible speaks of the last days, there being a great falling away. And there is a great falling away. You don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to be one of those people. And I want to encourage everybody that I come in contact with to hold on and to, above all, believe God.